Welcome to those online as well. This has been webcast on our YouTube channel. We're not expecting a fire alarm in the room, so if it does go off, please exit through the main doors and down the ramp towards the cathedral and assemble adjacent to that. That would be great. We'll start as usual with a round of introductions. So I'm Councillor Andrew Brown. I'm the Chair of the Economy and Skills Policy Committee, and I'll go around members.
Councillor Richard Eddy, and can I make an apology here, Chairman? Before the timing was changed, I have had a meeting at 5 p.m, so I will need to go early.
Councillor Jenny Bartle, Vice Chair.
Cam Hayward, Councillor for Knoll.
Serena Ralston, Clifton Down.
Toby Wells for Knoll. Councillor Tom Enard, Labour, Councillor for Horfield Ward.
Sue Collar, Labour Councillor for Bishopsworth.
Thank you, members. And I'll go around officers. I'll start with John. We'll go around these benches and finish with Ian and...
Good afternoon. John Smith, Executive Director for Growth and Regeneration.
Hi, I'm Sophie Farrer. I'm a Graduate Planning Policy Officer.
Simon Wilding, Chief Planner.
Good afternoon. Cliff Brand, Head of Service, Bristol Harbour Authority.
Clement Eagle, Head of Comms for the Temple Quarter LLP.
Karen Mercer, Chief Exec, Bristol Temple Quarter LLP.
Emma Hath, Head of Service, City Management and Response.
Good afternoon, Alex Hearn, Director Economy of Place.
Ian Hurd, Policy Committee Team.
Ashley Ferrero, Policy Committee Officer.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I don't believe we've got any apologies or substitutions. Okay. Except to note that Councillor Breckles is no longer, I believe, a member of, or not currently a member of this policy committee. Declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? No. Okay. So minutes of previous meeting. Are members content that these are a correct record of the meeting?
Could you technically move and second them?
Yeah, I'm asking. Yeah. So I'm not seeing any dissent from that. So can I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you. So we can confirm those are a correct record. Chair's announcements. So there's a couple of things I wanted to raise. One was with regards to Stoke Lodge, and we'll be hearing from members of the public forum on that shortly, but I wanted to raise this following the last meeting. So you'll be aware that the school has commenced and virtually completed the reinstalment of a fence on the site. There's also a number of other live issues at the moment, including the Planning Inspectorate's consideration of the public rights of way issue. But notwithstanding those, John and I have been working to meet both the school and campaigners separately, and the plan is for me to chair a round table with both sides before the end of this month to see if we can find some way towards some common ground on the issue. So I wanted to mention that. And the other issue I wanted to pick up again from the previous committee is St Nick's Market. So following the vote at the last committee to defer the consideration of the fee model, I've been working with officers to reflect on the debate and begin discussions on how we progress from here. In the immediate aftermath of the committee, an email also went out in my name to update traders on the outcome. Members expressed a desire to develop a vision for the market in partnership with the key stakeholders involving the traders, residents and visitors. Over the coming weeks, I will be working further with officers to address the concerns of the committee and seek to identify a way forward that balances the objectives and obligations we have, both to the traders and residents, in ensuring that the market thrives, but also to the whole city and council taxpayers to ensure that they benefit from St Nick's as an asset. Part of this work will be to encourage greater engagement with the ferries and traders. Part of this work will be greater engagement with the ferries traders, as well as seeking to identify funds for short-term investment in and improvements to the market. Ultimately, my aim is to have a more financially stable model for the market, which is supported by both investment and delivery plans to maintain and enhance its appeal, its special historic character, increase footfall and support trading. So that's a little update on that. So next we have public forum. So we have got 2 questions in public forum and 4 statements. So the questions are from Stephanie French, and you've got two questions, so you get up to 2 supplementaries. So have you seen the written answers that have been published?
Yes, thank you, committee. I have seen those 2 answers, yes.
Oh, right. Okay, so do you have a supplementary to the first one?
Well, I'm not quite sure whether the protocol says that I can comment on those 2 answers before asking my supplementary questions or not. So how would you like me to deal with this?
If you've got any comment, if you can keep it brief and then move to your question.
Fine, okay. Well, my comments really are common to both answers, and it is that planning officers will insist on describing events to me as if I was discussing permitted development, and I'm not discussing permitted development. I'm discussing tree preservation order regulations, and tree preservation order regulations trounce permitted development. So even if a developer is using permitted development, they nevertheless have to apply with the law on TPO regulations. They just cannot avoid it. And saying that it was all right afterwards, so that meant it was all right to break the law, that's nonsense too. That is not the way law works. You obey the law and then look at the consequences.
Okay, can you move to your question?
Yes, I'm going to go on to my questions now. My first question is, in the light of the reply to question 1, which said that for anybody exercising permitting development rights to ensure that they act lawfully, which effectively is blaming Cottam School for not applying, is the council now going to prosecute Cottam School for breaking the law? Because the law uses the word must. And if they do that prosecution, will they include...
Sorry, is that your question?
That's my question. There's
okay,
a little bit about cutting branches as well, but that's the main bit. Is the Bristol City Council going to prosecute Cottam School for breaking the law?
I think you've misread the answer in that we've actually said it's permitted development, right? And therefore there was no breaking of the law.
The law says that the TPO regulations say that a developer must get consent.
We can't get into protracted discussion, so can I have your second supplementary?
The second question is, in the light of the facts that this committee has now heard so much about the egregious breaches of planning law and regulation exercised by the council as a local planning authority, will this committee now be making an inquiry into whether the planning department of the council is fit for purpose?
In short, that wouldn't be top of my list of priorities for this committee. Members will have an opportunity at the next workshop to set priorities for this committee to raise that if that's a concern for them, and then we will agree as a committee what the priorities are. Okay, so having answered that, and then next we have 4 statements. So I'll take them in order. So is Jeff Costin here? No. Dorothy Nunn? I think it's just going to come back to you, Stephanie. Helen Powell. Sorry? Okay. Helen Powell, I'm assuming, is not here either. Okay, Stephanie, do you want to speak briefly to your statement?
No, not really. I have nothing further to say. I've said it so many times.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on, the next item on the agenda is a paper on houses and multiple occupation and additional Article 4 directions relating to those. So Simone, can I pass over to you to present this paper?
Yes, I will just give you a very brief overview and then maybe pass to Sophie, who's actually authored the paper, to say a little more. So we haven't done a review of the Article 4 areas that control the proliferation of HMOs in Bristol for about 5 years, and given that there has been quite a lot of concern raised from various members, we felt it was time to do another review. And actually there has been, in some areas, evidence found that it was right or supportable to extend those areas, because just to also highlight that an Article 4 should only be made where there's specific evidence of harm, and that the area to which the Article 4 should be applied should be as geographically small as possible. So I think with that, over to you, Sophie.
Yes, so as Simone said, we've had growing concerns about the kind of over-concentration and sort of increasing development of HMOs across the city. But the guidance and the sort of the legal test has changed slightly with the updated National Planning Policy Framework. So now, as Simone said, we have to identify the harm and make sure that the Article 4 is limited to the smallest geographic area in order to address that harm. So in reviewing the data and the evidence, we used a very similar process to our last review 5 years ago, where we took the census data from 2021 and we overlaid it onto a map of the city, looking specifically at multi-family households. Now, these aren't necessarily directly related to HMOs, but they give a good indication of areas where there's probably high HMO concentration. And so we looked at that and looked specifically at areas where they were, as a proportion of housing stock in the area, they were above 8.5%, mainly looking at the 10 to 20%, where as that's our policy threshold currently. On top of that, we then looked at the licensing scheme. So in the city, across the city, if you convert your home to a HMO, you have to apply for a mandatory or an additional HMO license. And we saw where there were high concentrations and clusters of those HMOs. And then we drew the boundary around them, adjusted to kind of make sense, sort of using functional geographies that people could identify. We weren't cutting houses in half to draw those boundaries. And so as a result, if you can see on as part of the report, sort of scrolling down, yeah, thank you. We're proposing to extend the Article 4 direction in 9 different areas, covering 12 wards. Yeah.
Maybe just to add, and the ward councillors in those wards have been alerted in advance, I think, which actually prompted you to do a little bit extra work, which prompted to do a little bit extra extension.
Yes, yeah, so we've responded to ward members who have alerted us to maybe other areas of concern where residents have raised real issues. So using their local insight as well to sort of guide the directions that we're taking them in. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you both. So I've seen Toby and Richard. So Toby.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for bringing the paper. It's a really important issue that we keep on top of this, and thank you for including the ward councillors for the affected wards as well. I saw some good collaboration happening there with councillors from all parties, so yeah, that's a good process, and I didn't realise you started from a really sort of data-driven approach as well, so that's really good. My question for you is about the next time that we can review this, noting that we're having the Temple Quarter campus opening soon, which might have an impact on some wards, like my own, which currently aren't massively affected by HMOs, but the new campus might sort of change that. So are we thinking about a review in 2 years' time, 3 years' time or something when we start to see those impacts?
We haven't set a particular time frame at the moment, but I think the key thing is as soon as further, if particular hotspots emerge and there's concerns, then we can review again. Otherwise it's up to members whether you want to set a backstop date, so to speak. But yeah, we haven't at the moment set a particular date, but we are certainly thinking we shouldn't leave it another 5 years probably.
And if I can add as well, is when we're unable to move preemptively with Article 4 direction, so we need to have the evidence of harmful growth before we can put in the Article 4 direction. But I think that it would be useful to keep it under review regularly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in our previous discussions and PCCB and whatnot, we certainly highlighted this need to keep it under review. Richard.
First, again, I thank Simone and Sophie for bringing this. This report certainly commands my wholehearted support, having served on the decent committees for almost 3 decades. I'm aware both of the contribution HMOs make to our housing stock and housing demand, but equally so some of the problems both for the tenants and also for the immediate surrounding communities. So certainly the Article 4 direction here commands my support. In fact, this was interestingly bookended because on Friday's Homes and Housing Delivery Committee, we had an update report on the free ward licensing system, which is halfway through, which covers 2 of the wards, and Tom behind me instituted, of course. Certainly, this seems to have been very successful from the stats actually provided. And the income generated by the licence fee is doing a lot towards allowing us to maintain and actually invest. One matter of concern, although I don't see HMOs as being a complete negative part of the solutions, shall we say, they found in the free wards over 80% of initial applications or houses which were licenses had breaches. So there was a concern there revealed in terms of raising the housing standards, of course. My one question is, of the 12 wards you're covering, one of the wards was covered in that licensing scheme but isn't proposed to be incorporated here. That's Bedminster. Is there any reason for that?
I think that Bedminster might be covered already. I think it's so in the initial review 5 years ago, I think it was already covered.
So it's already the Article 4 direction.
Yes, yes, I believe so.
Thank you. Tom?
Wanted to say firstly thank you to yourself and the team for working on this. I know quite a few of the Labour councillors came back to you with proposed modifications, because one of the challenges with these things, we put these in place, and then of course what happens is more HMOs will pop up on the board, because what this will do, as yourselves know, is remove that permitted development, right, force them through the planning system where we can manage that concentration much more effectively to make sure that we're retaining mixed and balanced communities. And we've obviously got the other big piece of the puzzle in place now through that additional licensing scheme that's citywide. I think from memory you can only base your sort of data on licensed properties is my understanding from having had many a discussion with the private housing team whilst I was the cabinet member. So a huge thank for this work. I think keeping that regular review will be really crucial, just to see what happens in terms of where HMOs start popping up in concentrations, because we've sought to regulate other sections. And I think Councillor Eddie sort of makes an interesting point about sort of the licensing schemes and just how many properties actually, because I had to read that report, have required improvement as well. So hopefully we'll just keep on top of any enforcement activity, which I know doesn't just sit with yourselves, and just make sure the planning team and the housing team continue to talk to each other regularly. So yeah, thank you. We'll be fully supporting this proposed paper today.
Thanks, Tom. I had Serena and then Jenny, and then I might draw this to a close if there's no contention.
Thank you very much. Very important piece of work, especially in my neck of the woods. And I'm glad to hear that it will be kept under regular review. I just wanted to ask what happened last time when you had this, and I agree with this time phasing, but when you had the 12-month gap between the decision and the implementation, was there, just out of interest, a rush of HMOs being pushed through before the implementation of Article 4? And how was it managed?
Well, the 12-month gap for implementation is what we legally have to do, because otherwise we become liable for compensation, for financial compensation.
Yeah, I understand that one. Yeah.
In terms of, I'm not too sure whether we've got data on how much got rushed through beforehand, but we could see whether we can even find it out, but and let you know afterwards if that's helpful.
Yeah. It may not have been an issue, but if it had been, it would be worth knowing how it was managed. That was all.
Thanks, Serena. Jenny.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, we've just said regular review several times, so probably we as a committee maybe need to give like a vague direction on what would instigate the next review, and maybe just have a sort of brief discussion. I do think that the conversation you had with councillors was very productive. I heard some really good feedback was received, and I don't know, maybe just having something written down that makes sure that happens as well. I'm just kind of aware that we've left that sort of floating and unspecified, so it's something we should maybe pick up.
So the licensing scheme, the data is updated every 6 to 8 weeks. And so we actually can use really up-to-date data. Obviously, the process of going through putting something in for committee takes longer than 6 to 8 weeks. So I don't think we can update it every time we get up-to-date data. But I think it's well worth discussion about how much resource we want to commit and when to doing this. But I think that's a decision for members.
Tom.
Just a suggestion that perhaps a paper could come back to this committee in just over 12 months' time, once the articles have kicked in, and you'll have a bit of a sense what if anything, the impacts that's had over the next 12 months. Obviously doesn't stop the chair and vice chair from calling into their briefings in between, but that would be my suggested approach.
Yeah, assuming we're still here, of course, as a committee. I was going to suggest a year to have a first look at this again, and I'm sure that members in the broader council will certainly pick up chatter if there is an increased number of HMOs in areas outside of this Article 4 direction in the meantime, so we can pick up a sense of need as well. But yeah, if we could do a sort of formal review in a year, that'd be great. Okay, I'm going to bring this one to a close. So, for clarity, we are asked to instruct the Head of Legal and Democratic Services to make non-immediate Article 4 directions, i.e. 12 months in advance of them taking effect, to remove permitted development rights for the change of use from a dwelling house use class C3 to a small HMO use class C4 for the areas as set out in Appendix A, and give notice of such directions in accordance with the regulations, and also to delegate authority to the Director of Economy and Place to instruct the head of legal services, that's Directorate of Economy of Place, that's you, Alex, to instruct the head of legal and democratic services to confirm the above Article 4 directions within 12 months of their making, subject to consideration of representations made during the period of notice in accordance with the regulations. Okay, can I have a seconder? Oh, Richard. I had a plethora of hands there. Okay, those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, so moving on, we have got the, we're sticking with Simone for the planning performance 6-monthly update. So we're going to take this and then subsequently move on to the local engagement plan as a separate matter. Okay, let's go with this one.
Indeed. Right, so we've got performance updates since last one we did, I suppose, 31st of March, and this is now another 6 months on. And we've had another really good improvement period where we've had 2 sets of formal statistics published as well since then, both also formally confirming the substantial improvement that has been made. Unfortunately, the Secretary of State hasn't yet followed through with making a decision on dedesignation. We have, because he had written to us in June, just before that first publication that confirmed the great progress we had made. He'd written that he would make a quick decision. Or, well, that's certainly how I had read it, but maybe I was too optimistically interpreting it. But anyway, we have followed up just last week again, saying we were really pleased to receive his letter that he would make a decision soon. And we have since had those 2 formal publications, so fingers crossed we will get that dedesignation quickly. But there is no deadline, there is no pressure on him to do that. But like I said, there has been really good improvement. And I just thought I also give you some additional figures, because the figures in the paper were, of course, from almost 2.5 weeks ago when the publication deadline was for the papers, and things have moved on in a good direction since. So the final number of decisions in October was 397, which we were very, very pleased about, because we'd said we would aim for at least 380, but actually managed to overshoot that slightly. We have reduced the old ones down to 235, which I think is roughly on track. I can't remember what we'd said earlier, what the range we'd given was. And the actual number for unallocated applications has dropped further as well, so that was 28. The number of non-determination appeals has stayed at 8, which again is really good. So that's now as low as it was in 2020. So I mean, for 2020 it was for the whole period. So clearly we still need to keep it at that for the remainder of the year as well. But that is absolutely our intention, and we are doing what we can. In terms of the, again, the composition of the old cases has, or rather the composition of all the cases has moved in the right direction, in that gradually, we're getting rid of the older ones, and we're understanding better as well. I suppose that was the slide 6 that we produced this time for the first time. How are they actually composed, those old cases? Interestingly, there is also a number of them, around between 20 and 30, that we can dispose, but we're currently just awaiting. That's often tied to other parties doing something before we can do that, but basically they're in a way debt applications that although they count towards the total, there's nothing happening on them. And as of this morning, we have for the first time broken through we called it the 900 barrier, and are below it. So again, while maybe not quite as fast as we had hoped in terms of getting to our ultimate aim, we are still making good progress. And this, we're now much lower than it's ever been before, or certainly in the history that we have data for, or easily accessible data for. So all in all, I would say really good progress, and hopefully you agree.
Thank you, Simone. Right, hands up all over the place. So I saw Richard, Jenny, Toby and Serena in that order.
Simone, senior officers get almost as much flack as members for delivery or non-delivery, so I think we ought to formally thank you and your team, backed by Alex and John, for what you've achieved over the last couple of years. I know both members and the industry have given you a lot of pressure, and it's been no easy feat to turn things around, but the figures you give here and you verbally just summarise confirm we've made discernible, real concrete progress, and we're part of the solution to actually redeveloping Bristol, not part of the obstacles. Obviously, you actually give some detailed stats about satisfaction with recent performance. I'm one of the members who regularly attend, as you know, the planning users groups and various other fora under my housing delivery hat. And I have to say the positive feedback, the change we've heard has been quite noticeable. And, obviously nothing's ever going to be wholly rosy in the garden, but applicants, their funders, and also architects have also been very positive about the change, so that's good. The one question I have, and the information you give is very good. Obviously, you've had quite a challenge, which I believe you've undoubtedly risen to actually meet our vacancies on the staffing side, and we've achieved, I know, a lot of new graduate planners. What's the current situation? I know it's always a changing feature, and we lose more experienced people, of course. We need to bring people up.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Having good skilled people in post is absolutely core to delivering good performance. I would say at the headline level, we've been in a really good place, more or less since last summer, where we've no longer had to rely on any agency staff. We're getting still a little bit of consultancy support, but that is more because we're getting extra funding through the Atlas support, the New Homes Delivery Programme, and therefore it's sort of genuine additional capacity rather than us needing to use our own funds to plug some gaps. We still every so often lose somebody, unfortunately, mainly because we seem to be training them so well that they get snatched up by other people, including the inspectorate. I think we had 2 at least that went to the inspectorate, actually. Having to say, though, we are also having a secondment program at the moment. We've got our secondee from Pins, who's staying with us for 3 months, started today. The first one went back about a month or so ago. With the most recent one, the graduate recruitment, that had been moderately successful, shall we say. We did that in February, I think, is when we kicked it off, and it was probably just not a very good time to do it. But And therefore we instead then said, rather than rerunning another one in May or so, we had anyway the opportunity to take part in Pathways to Planning, where we had really great success with Sophie's one of our earlier cohort Pathways to Planning graduates. And so we said we would wait. It did mean, though, for the majority of them waiting until September. So there was, in a way, a slightly longer lag than we would have liked. But we had some really good candidates starting then, mostly in September. We have, at the moment, almost a full cohort. There's one post, because sometimes it's also, as soon as you fill one, because like we had one principal planner go to the inspectorate, like I said, we then filled that permanent post, but because it was somebody internal who was successful with that, he then creates this trickle-down effect. So we haven't quite backfilled every single one, but on the whole, I would say we're in a pretty good position.
Thank you. I had Jenny next on the list.
Yeah, I had kind of two unrelated questions. One was kind of addressed by what Richard alluded to, but you've given us lots of data about us getting through more planning applications. But in terms of like your internal team experience, are you finding things are actually easier? Are you getting, the same number of harassing emails? Is it all the same? It's always like a challenge, or is it like actually feeling a bit more like we're okay, we're not too overworked and stressed? That's the first question. And then I wanted to talk about if there are any new worries or emerging risks, like changes from the NPPF, the local plan, giving you more work, or sort of the viability concerns, having a budget pressure, and is there anything we need to know that, as sort of policy direction, might be something that we need to start looking at now to kind of head that off?
Okay, on the first point around sort of well-being and the level of failure demand gone down? I would definitely. I think yes, we get fewer. Certainly, from what I can see, I think it's definitely got much reduced. It's not to say that every so often there is still a grumpy email or. But the thing is also we often get it also from sometimes we get it from neighbours grumpy that we've approved something. So the thing is, in planning you can never win, or you can never please everybody. So there is still a degree of that, and that will always persist. But I think the other point I want to say, because you also mentioned well-being. We've always been keen to make sure we put the officers' well-being front and centre, also during times when the backlog was really bad, which was one of the reasons why we had so many unallocated applications, because we needed to make sure we still safeguarded people's well-being. Nevertheless, clearly being in that much better position makes people more relaxed and happier, and I suppose just having so many new people start, and it's always a reason to be cheerful. So yeah, I would say morale is good, and we had a number of celebratory events, because you need to create almost like a virtuous circle energy. With regards to risks on the horizon or new challenges, I would say the biggest one is probably the viability challenge that you've mentioned, and how best to deal with it, and to particularly then think around what trade-offs are we prepared to make in terms of how much can we be maybe a bit more pragmatic so we can help good development continue and get off the ground, and where would it go too far? Because we also need to make sure that we keep long-term and quality and creating a good place at the centre of, and when would that go too far? In terms of NPPF changes, we don't know, I suppose, what at the moment what they are. We're promised another a pre-Christmas present of national design, or we think there is national design policies, the national design code, the new NPPF. That's all coming out pre-Christmas. So in a way, that is almost a bit too much of a Christmas present. But we'll just deal with it, when it lands, and I'm sure we make the most of it.
Lovely, thank you. Toby.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, well done. Big well done. I mean, this is a matter I've been quite challenging with you at past committees, but it's getting really satisfying now to see that trend coming down and down and down as the department gets more stable and we reach a kind of sustainable level of workload. So well done to the team. The designation now seems like an inevitability rather than an uncertainty, but hopefully the Secretary of State will see it that way soon as well. One thing I noticed when looking at the stats, comparing looking at the number of appeals against refusal which were allowed by the inspectorate, it's increased very slightly over the years, but if you take that as a ratio with the number of decisions made, it's actually falling, which to me is an indicator that the quality of our decision making is increasing as well. So that's a really, really good sign. And probably my message on that is, with the further improvement actions that you have, let's be careful not to take it too far. Let's make sure we don't compromise on the quality of the decision making, because as you just mentioned, that's what's really important to us and to the people of the city. So we're almost at the sustainable point, so let's not kind of overshoot and do too much. And just finally, a constructive point on the forecasting, something I always pick up on. The forecast as it's shown in the slide isn't realistic. It doesn't really make any sense anyway. It goes beyond where we would like to be. Yeah, I think it's really important that we have a handle on where we expect to kind of flatten out that curve and how we're going to get there. That's all.
And I think you're referring to the graph rather than the forecast in the table. Yeah, I mean that's unfortunately where we're just operating with some imperfect tools as well, and where actually the line of where it should be, we always have to draw in by hand because somehow the tool can't seem to do it properly for us. Completely agree. But in that sense, what I would say is look at the forecast in the table is in a way more important when I look at it than in the graph. Yeah, but clearly we want to keep improving our tools as well, both that graph, but more importantly, I should have maybe mentioned as well, as of about 3 weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, we got our very first version of the Power BI dashboard working. And I think it's a major milestone that we've got that now. That makes it a lot easier. At the moment, it's still a very, very basic minimum viable product version that we're now working with our data colleagues on improving it further. That, as we progress, that will also enable better forecasting.
Thank you. I've got Serena and Tom, but I'm going to abuse my privilege as a chair and come in here because I'd been going to ask you about the Power BI and the potential that has. But also I was going to highlight the appeals data as well, because I think that's quite a key part of this. It's not just about pushing through decision making, is it? It's about making decisions that stand up. And so in that regard, it looks really positive, and that ratio that Toby alluded to, particularly for appeals against refusal, does show that where we're refusing things, by and large, the majority, the vast majority of them are being refused on solid grounds. The only question I had on that was that uplift in figures for 2025. I assume is relating to appeals settled this year. So is some of that a hangover from before? What do we know about this? About where's the trend in terms of appeals made? If that makes sense.
So you're referring to the table on slide 3, presumably?
I am. If it's slide 3, I'm referring to the table on one of the slides.
yeah. That's about appeal decisions made rather than appeals lodged, and therefore because the inspectorate has got quite a bit of a backlog as well, particularly. So most of our appeals are actually written rep appeals, and they take relatively long. So there is quite a lag with them coming through. That's again an area where it's hard for us to forward forecast or analyse what it is. But I would expect, because we have been saying, this point around we cannot sacrifice robustness for the sake of speed, and so we've been, putting quite a bit of emphasis on that for quite some time. I would expect, therefore, that it should remain. But it always depends a little bit. It just depends on what is the composition of what's been applied for. Unfortunately, a lot of the time it also relates to HMO appeals, and those are actually among the more difficult ones to defend.
Lovely, thank you, Simone. Right, so I've got Serena and then Tom, and then I'm going to draw a line under this and we can move on.
I just wanted to echo colleagues, really, it's fantastic to see such progress, really, really good news. And as others have said, I think indicators such as appeals dismissals going up are really good as well. Just a few small queries from me. So the applications that are over 26 weeks old, which are obviously going down, which is great. How many, well, not exact proportion, but are some of those or most of those majors, and what are the blockers there and why? And I do have another question if I could sneak that in. Is that right?
Sorry. If you look in the slides, if you go to slide 6, that actually gives you the breakdown of the nature of the and in a way, as I would say, to be expected. For example, those that are held up because the Section 106 is still being sorted out, most of those are majors. Indeed, or all the ones that are still have got an ongoing PPA, they're all majors. But there's others as well where they're actually either minors, but some minors are still quite complex, or not reported. So that could often be conditions. It could be Section 73 applications, and they often have quite a bit of complexity. And certainly, what we're seeing is the viability situation that is definitely adding to the complexity and what makes it so difficult to resolve some applications. And I would say a number of applications are stuck for that reason.
Understood, thank you. Yeah. The other thing I was going to say is it looks like we're beating pins on response times, which is excellent. So although I was very satisfied with that, applications are going there, we're actually quicker than them. Great. One other quick question, I promise. The listed building consent order for solar panels, that was Clifton, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. It looks like you're saying that's helped performance, sort of speed things up in that area. Is there any prospect of that being rolled out to other parts of the city? Has it been that effective that we can do that?
Well, it would help those schemes that would otherwise have had to make an application. It doesn't, and as such, it maybe just reduces the number of applications, but it's not the sort of thing that you can measure as a sort of, a specific quantifiable impact, and that you can directly relate. So it's more it's more logic that we're applying to say it must have an impact, because certainly for the ones who would want solar panels, that they don't have to get an application now. It clearly speeds them up. In terms of expanding it, it is something that we're considering, but there's always so many things to do, and therefore we've currently not put it at the top of our priority list. We are getting another 3 students from UE to do an agency project, because that was what enabled us before to do it. But actually we've identified all other projects that are really important as well, and so we've for now prioritized something else.
If we can request an update sometime, not here, don't want to hold things up, on the effectiveness of that and how it could be programmed in to talk about another time.
Yeah, we can note that. Tom, last word to you.
Thank you so much for the work you as an officer team have done. It's been probably also a cautionary tale about recruitment freezes as well, and the long-term impacts that they can have as well. I had a couple of questions and then just a comment. My first question was just around statutory consultees. One of the things I've raised before here has been one of the things that we know was having quite a significant impact, and perhaps a reduced impact now, was some of the statutory consultees and how promptly they were in responding. And I just wondered if you could update the committee on how that's going, and also if there are any particular statutory consultees that are particularly doing well or particularly a challenge.
So definitely, really good point actually for bringing that up. The one statutory consultee where we have the biggest challenge on some applications is the Environment Agency, because of the flooding objection. And clearly, if they've got a flooding objection, then that is something we need to take extremely serious and need to look to resolve before we can move to. And that is definitely a reason why quite a number will be held up. Otherwise, I wouldn't particularly highlight any other external statutory consultee. Then we've clearly also got our internal statutory consultees, where I would say the situation has certainly also improved. That doesn't mean that there isn't quite a bit more room for improvement, I would also say. But because they're colleagues, it's in a way easier to, and where we can also be a bit more creative in terms of let's work together to find ways to unlock capacity, where we are, for example, having surgery, so that schemes that are a bit more, they need an input, but it doesn't necessarily need a very, very detailed input, that they can be just verbally discussed in a surgery, and therefore we can deal with more that way. Or just sort of, being say, actually, this one is really prioritizing things for them more, and say, can you give us your feedback in that order? That would really help. We can't do that with the external ones. The other thing that we are looking, actually, that's one of the things that we have prioritized for the students who are coming in to do, is that we're trying to produce more internal standing advice, so that for the schemes, again, where that require a degree of advice, but it's sort of the very lowest level of that particular expert, that we can just cover these through standing advice by training our planning officers to basically be able to apply standing advice. Then they don't need to go to the subject matter expert. So we're reserving the subject matter expert for those cases that really need the most.
Tom, Alex wanted to come in on this as well, and then I'll let you come back.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment in relation to the Environment Agency. So obviously they're really important in many respects to us, and one of the reasons we collectively have challenges in Bristol is obviously because of the flood risk in Bristol, and that requires a lot of detailed modelling. I meet regularly with my counterparts at the Environment Agency to discuss a number of things, and I know that they have increased their capacity within their organisation when it comes to modelling. And I think we should hopefully start to see that flow through, for want of a better word, with timeframes in terms of consultation. They recognise their challenges they faced and are looking to address that.
Thanks, Alex. Right, Tom.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-on question before I come to my second question, was just on the internal consultees, then which teams are there sort of more capacity challenges with at the moment, and is anything being put in place to address that?
I guess the key ones are in priority order. Ecology or BNJ, which was caused by a recruitment issue where basically somebody left and it just took some time to backfill, particularly again because we had that sort of ripple effect as well. But that is, that the new person is now in place, so we should see some improvement there, and that's where we're specifically also looking at that standing advice approach. Other areas, I suppose, is transport, but again, they have recruited, they are training up people, and, where, again, I would say we have seen lots of improvement, but we can still improve further. But it's also an area where it's really important, when I would say when safety is involved, you always need to make sure that we get it right. And pollution control, I suppose that is more because it's a very, how can I say, very, very small, very specialist expertise, and therefore if somebody's on holiday, then immediately it can cause knock-on effects. But again, I think, we have got measures in place. There are contracts in place as well to help backfill, manage with peak demand, so to speak, but it's expensive, and clearly we try and avoid having to use it, given the financial situation.
Sure, and then there could be other complications like when planning and highways rules all intersect, as I've heard about recently, but I won't go there today. My second question was just coming back to the appeals against refusal, because I've just obviously look at these statistics. The year-to-date figure, just over 6 months into the year, is already higher than the previous 3 years. And I think you did touch on it a little bit, but could you just give us a flavour of what's in there? What's in those allowed appeals? Is it just HMOs? Are there other things? How much of that is, they're just difficult to defend cases? How much of that is about practice here at the council? Is there any learning we're taking from that and how we're dealing with those types of applications going forward?
So I think in percentage terms, it's still not that great, or not that bad actually, because in percentage terms, this is around a quarter, maybe a bit over a quarter, but that is still probably better than national average, and in that sense, it's still a good outcome to be proud of. But yeah, in terms of allowed, which specifically, I don't have that currently in mind. I think from my recollection of what I've seen, that it did include, unfortunately, a number of HMO appeals as well. But we would have to look in more detail if that is something you would want more information on.
I think just a follow-up email just outline some of the key themes would be fine from my perspective. If you don't have the information to hand, rather sort of it was got an accurate answer than one that wasn't. So, and the last thing I was just going to say as well, there can never be too much planning reform as a Christmas present. I think we've, there's a lot of work happening to try and streamline the planning system, or where there'll be various views on that, and also the planning infrastructure bill report stage to the House of Lords now, so that's nearly there. And also one of the key things in there was around the fee setting regime changing, which will definitely be a game changer, and we know has hamstrung us in years gone by. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That point about if we can have some follow-up stats on that, and maybe in future versions of this, if you can unpack that a little bit going forward, that'd be useful. We are just asked to note the report, so we'll consider that noted and move on to the update to the local enforcement plan. So we are being asked to approve the suggested update to the local enforcement plan. So Simone.
Indeed, me again. So this is the proposed update to the local enforcement plan, which hadn't been updated even longer than the Article 4 direction. So the current one is from 2017, which was in, of course, still very, very different times. There have been quite a number of legislative changes since then, but which of course is also what we've updated in this in the local enforcement plan. So particularly around timescales, now it's consistently 10 years, whereas before there was the distinction between 10 and 4 years. Some fee levels have been changed as well, but those are the sort of main changes. We are also, well, we've explained, I suppose, that while the situation was so dire in development management, we had to prioritise getting things under control there. For about a year now, we've also been trying to get better on top of the enforcement backlog. With, we've made some progress, but not quite as much as I would have liked to seen. But I don't mean that as a criticism to my team. I think it's just not to be underestimated. In enforcement, I would say even more than in development, some cases disproportionately take up an awful lot of time, and others may actually not need all that much. Anyway, we have therefore come to the conclusion, or a few months ago, but it takes some time to take through these sort of structure changes, we'd come to the conclusion that we would need an additional team manager, a more senior team manager as well than we had so far, a more senior subject matter expert. And we advertised that about a month or so ago, and the interviews are tomorrow. So keep your fingers crossed that we get a really good candidate, and I think that will make a massive difference. We can then, a bit further down the line, we can still review, is that then enough or not? But it's always a tricky question, because it's not just sort of pure numbers. It's both. It's I suppose who you have and how many you have. And I think that should actually put us in a really good place, but it may not yet be enough. But then, the financial pressures are always on, and enforcement is a discretionary area where we're not earning any income. So it is cross-subsidised from development management. So we will just have to see whether that will give us enough.
Thank you, Simone. I've got Richard and Serena, and then Tom, and I've got something to say as well.
Try to be mercifully brief, Chairman, as I have to leave shortly for my 5 o'clock meeting. Firstly, sincere thanks for this, Simone. The whole report, as someone who served on DC committees more often, almost, than I've had hot dinners, obviously meat or fish to my Green colleagues. I have to say I found this very helpful to actually unpack the processes we employ in enforcement. I found this more helpful than any other report I've previously seen on this. Obviously, most of us look at enforcement as perhaps a low-key casework thing on delegated consents, but it is even more important, as I regularly say, because as you're well aware, the small number of determinations which go to DC committees, some on balance, of course, are very much on the basis of we have a pool of conditions which are enforceable. And when you're recommending, your officers are recommending to members, they back this. As I say, perhaps on balance, we need to have confidence the entire enforcement process is robust. So that's my plea. The only question I have is, obviously you mentioned the recruitment, well, very soon tomorrow, of an experienced manager, of course, and that sounds important and good to us. Are you waiting to that and advice from the new post order, or last year I know you actually transferred 2 planning officers to that under-resourced team? Do you have any view about if further transfers are necessary?
Like I said, at the moment we're hoping that that would be sufficient, because in overall resourcing terms that would be the best outcome. But we'll keep an open mind about it, because it's like I said, it's also not just about how many, it's also about how advanced are they in their skills. I think what's been really pleasing as well, that one of the officers that we had transferred last year was able to actually progress up on the ladder, and so it's in this sort of grow your own spirit, because we had a vacancy there where one officer was successful in getting that, so that was really, really good. We'll keep it under review, but and in the meantime we just have to really make sure we prioritize carefully, and what, where they have had some really good successes. I think we've certainly mentioned at the DC committees, maybe not here before, but there have been some really high-profile HMO enforcement inquiries, which we were successful in defending, and where there has also been a cost award and a very, very explicit cost award, where the unreasonableness of the appellant had been very clearly stated. So in that case, we are actually hoping to recover quite a lot of, well, we will claim back all of our costs on that appeal. But, they do swallow up an awful lot of time and resource.
Serena, I had you next on my list.
Yeah, I think in the past it's fair to say that the service has been overstretched and has struggled a bit. I'm just wondering, though, with the triage criteria, page 76 onwards, a few questions about that, please. Are these new? If not, excuse my ignorance, what are they based on? And what evidence? To my mind, coming to it seems a little bit woolly. So I just wonder if you've ported those over from the last plan, or if there's something in national policy they're based on, or so forth.
That is actually an area where we've beefed up and made it clearer, gave more examples, been much how could I say, more focused on that. It's around public interest, making sure that we protect the public interest, because enforcement is not about resolving neighbourly disputes. Neighbourly disputes should really be resolved between neighbours. And often and unfortunately, we get pulled into that, but where they should clearly be at the bottom of and often it's not even appropriate in those cases for us to get involved at all, if it's like a party wall dispute or so. So yeah, we've already beefed that up quite a lot, but if there are specific things that you can think of that you had expected to be there and were surprised not to see there, then by all means let us know, and we can maybe include that if they're appropriate for inclusion.
I think what I was getting at was what it was based on. So is there nationally, I assume there isn't, is it local to every authority, different to every local authority they come up with these, or is there a sort of national policy criteria or something?
It is for every local authority to come up with it. There is one fairly recent, I think from 2024, national research document that the national government has produced that we have linked from that as well. I need to, just above 3.2 immunity, you see the link, House of Commons Library 2024, that's the, there's a national sort of good practice document. To be honest, I can't remember how much it goes into detail on those particular points because it was a few months ago that I last read it. But yeah, certainly where national good practice is available, we have drawn on it.
Thank you. It's just things like significant harm, I suppose it's trying to, but that's not for now. We can drill down that another time, maybe, what that actually means.
Thanks, Irina. I guess with these things, there's always an element of subjectivity. I think it's what you're maybe, and maybe we need to be clearer in our language how we're defining the boundaries of that subjectivity, I guess. Tom, I had you next.
Thank you, and thank you for bringing this before the committee. I think there's a couple of questions and just a couple of points I want to raise more generally around things like communication. I think the first thing I wanted to ask about, and I appreciate it is covered under other items and it's probably quite rare, but I assume occasionally we do get situations where a development is refused permission and they go ahead anyway. And I just thought that wasn't really sort of drawn. I don't know how common that is. You may say that it's so rarely happens, it's covered by other things, but I think that's where we've seen it gets sort of particularly, although I think Culture Gym had already started their process, but I think that's where things have got particularly tense with the community, is the fact they've just gone ahead anyway, despite being told no. And I appreciate that the planning's, LPA's position on that has been to regularise it, but the issue there is about what that does to confidence in the planning system, where, okay, you can just commit a breach, it's fine, they'll tell you to regularise it later. And I think that we just have to think about how we approach some of those situations with a bit more sensitivity, because it has caused a lot of upset in the local community. And our local councillor, Louis Martin, has been quite hot on it. And I'm aware there's probably some people that are pro the gym as well, but there's something about that confidence in process, that confidence in following the rules, because if others see that they can get that organisation got away with it, what are others then going to do if they're looking at the same sort of situation or similar situation? So I wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, it's a good point, but so the general principle of being able to, having to allow applicants to put in an application retrospectively, where there's a prospect that it can be fixed, that is something that is also in that national document. So that is definitely not something that we're just doing here in Bristol. Yes, there's quite possibly ways of us being able to communicate better still, and it's something that we are looking at to continuously improve how we communicate things.
Yeah, but this was about a refusal as well, isn't it? This is a bit different from someone's been, you should have got planning permission for that, and we now need you to apply to regularise it. This is someone was told no and carried on anyway. And I think there is a difference there.
The issue is it's all about fact and degree. Yeah. If they've been refused planning permission and they blatantly do it anyway, then there may well be a cause for stepping in straight away. I think, in a particular case that you're referring to, if they submit very quickly, though, again, another application, which on the face of it could solve the issue, we will need to entertain it and can't just ignore it. But clearly, we do need to make sure they're not taking the mickey out of us. In other situations, we may not even become aware of it. If somebody is just very, very minor, in a very, very minor way, not following the consent or the conditions that they have been given, we may not be aware of it, in which case, we couldn't enforce it. But clearly, when we become aware of it, there's always the question then to be answered first: how serious a harm is it causing? Is it expedient? Because while we have to investigate, the decision to actually enforce it, that is discretionary, and it's dependent on whether it's expedient to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think I understand the point you're making is proportionality. You know, is a really crucial point. I think there's also something about how we maintain confidence in the planning system. I mean, for those residents that have got music blaring at 5:30, 6 in the morning through their walls, they're probably less happy about it. And I'm aware that the planning authority has invited the applicants to put in a fresh application. I do just think we need to think about that confidence in the system, because that confidence can quickly go. And I think, you know, I just encourage the planning service to look at that particular case again if it can. The other thing I was just going to reflect on and recognise some of those capacity challenges. My second question is, with the changes in the fees that are coming in through the planning and infrastructure bill, will that help to free up some resource if it's needed, noting your points earlier, that you could then put into further enforcement activity if you needed it?
Potentially, but it depends also on the detail of what comes out, because, like I said, enforcement in itself doesn't generate any income, and there was certainly in the consultation questions around to which extent is it appropriate to cross-subsidise, because what you're actually saying then is that developers of housing schemes should cross-subsidise the enforcement. If you had too high, if you're having high local fees so that you can afford more enforcement staff, basically, and you know, given what we know about viability, I think we really need to also ask, is that really what we would want to do? Because ultimately, if you've got high application fees, that could also be a dampener on applications coming forward. So I think it's a careful balance that we will have to strike.
That wasn't
we set the fees.
Yeah, that wasn't necessarily my suggestion to use planning fees for enforcement. Wasn't what I suggested, because I think there's a general fund contribution that's still made to the planning department, or do the fees now fully cover?
At the moment, the fees cover the whole, certainly the whole of the development management function.
Okay, great.
And including enforcement, but what we don't actually cover at the moment is all the contributions from the statutory consultees, and that is something that we should really factor into our thinking as well, that we really, in order to get speedy responses from our statutory consultees, we need to make sure that they are appropriately resourced as well.
Thank you, that's helpful. A final point, and I'll make where it was just one of communication as well, in terms of when planning enforcement cases are live, just make sure councillors are getting updates. I had one, I think, went in February, that's still not resolved. I've had to chase several times. So I think it's just that point, make sure councillors are being kept in the loop, noting capacity challenges, things like that, just so we know what's going on, because I then hear off the residents when they're unhappy about the lack of communication. So it's helpful if, you know, we can make sure that we're empowered with the information that we need to ensure that we can keep residents informed as per our roles as elected councillors. Thank you.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, I do recognise that we can improve communications. It is always a balance as well, though, to strike, because it can take often a long time to, you know, to get a meaningful, to be able to provide a meaningful update, and just sending an email every month, we're still negotiating. I'm not sure how helpful that is.
Yeah, it's not been the example. It's been about 8 months without a meaningful update. So,
thanks, Tom. I'm just going to pick up on a couple of these points. I've got Jenny, and I've got the main point I was going to make, which I'm holding back, but I was just going to pick up on a couple of those points. One is this whole point around proportionality and stuff, because I think that's one of our main frustrations as councillors. Is, you know, is the you know, if someone breaches consent, and I'm not talking about particular cases, and you know, but if someone breaches consent, is invited, or you know, and they're given a chance to readdress that through retrospective permission, from a councillor's point of view, and from a resident confidence point of view, that's not really, you know, that there is no penalty there. There is no deterrent effect of that. So I think we need to be, whilst that's unfortunately a feature of the system, I think we need to be clear and robust where we can be in pushing back, but also get our comms, make sure that we're getting comms out in terms of, trumpeting those cases where we have been able to make substantive, take substantial action against people who have breached consents as well, so that we can say, look, when the circumstances allow, and we have all the evidence, and there's no other sort of softer remedy available, we will take robust action through the courts or through whatever other means we may have at our disposal to enforce. I'm going to come to Jenny and then wrap it up with my own final thoughts.
Yeah, something I guess I didn't get too much of, and Serena's already mentioned, and I guess this is actually what Tom was sort of talking about, is when we're assessing the level of harm, the seriousness of it, I suppose I don't know how, as a councillor or as a resident, I can, if there's anything I can do or say that would change the planning department's assessment. So, for example, I don't know, there's something in my ward that's been built on highways land, and that highways land being like literally the road versus a bit of spare path, that's obviously like how much that's going to have an impact on how you would assess it. But if the residents are like, oh well, yeah, that's actually getting in my way, and loads of people are complaining about it to me, does that have an impact? Versus like, I don't know, I've raised something and a notice has been served, and then it's like, well, it turns out actually nobody cared apart from one person, so maybe it's not as serious as we thought. Is that a kind of process that can occur, or is it very much just like, I don't know, I went and looked and it was illegal, so I served a notice against these people? Sort of, what's the sort of gamut of how that assessment is made, and is there anything that communities and councillors can do to affect that?
Yeah, so the assessment is very much around what is the consequence, what's the impact. If for example, safety is impacted, that is always very, very significant. The example you've given would probably not be a planning enforcement matter, but more because there's a separate highways enforcement regime. But yeah, to understand, what is the impact if many more people are affected, or even just if it's not safety but more inconvenienced, it's slightly less, but it still is of course important to know. So it is about understanding what is the actual harm in terms of the actual disbenefit caused by it being different from what it should have been.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap things up, and I'm just going to thank you, Simone, for these two papers. Actually, they were in a previous incarnation, they were put together as one paper, and often we separated them out because there's this key decision with regards to the local enforcement plan. But it's sort of, I think, in some ways circles back to the question posed in public forum earlier. And if I had been quicker in thinking on my feet, I could have referred to these papers in answering that question. But I think they highlight that the direction of travel within planning is very much in the right direction compared to where we were at, but also I think highlights, how we need to be, and you referred to this in terms of the recruitment for someone in the enforcement team, how we maybe need to be pivoting slightly as well in terms of, focus and seeking to ensure that too goes, continues to go in the right direction. Especially if we get de-designation formalised, that maybe gives us a bit more leeway as well to make sure that we can get those two rolling along together. So thank you very much for the paper. So we are, the recommendation, sorry, that is, or what we've been asked to do is to approve the updated local enforcement plan. Can I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Jenny. And can I ask all those in favour to raise their hands? Lovely. So unanimous with those still in the room. Okay, I'm really conscious of time. We have burned through quite a bit of time on those first few items. But we'd normally take a comfort break around about now in our meetings. Do people want to press on, or would people appreciate a 5-minute comfort break? 5 minutes. Okay, we'll be back at 5. back to it. I don't know if someone needs to press a button on. Is Tom around there? Oh, good to go? Cool. Right, so next item is the Harbour Strategic Plan 2026 to 2031, and this is Cliff.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Bristol Harbour Authority requires a strategic plan to guide the organisation in achieving self-sufficiency by 2031, amongst other things. This 5-year plan sets out the Harbour Authority's strategic priorities, of which there are 8 over the 5-year period 2026 to 2031. Each priority has a number of strategic initiatives which detail how it will achieve its aim. The plan sets out the Harbour's priorities for reaching its vision and sets out clear action on how the Harbour will work with businesses, communities and investors to make it a more sustainable, resilient and enjoyable place for everyone. It's clear about how progress will be made year on year, and this strategic plan will be supported by a more detailed business plan which will be presented to the Harbour Committee in January. The plan is both ambitious and practical, meaning the Harbour can have confidence in tackling the current financial deficit and making it ready for the future, and able to significantly contribute to the city's wider economic and environmental goals. This plan has been widely consulted upon, as detailed under Appendix I, and the Economy and Skills Committee is asked to consider and approve this plan for Bristol Harbour Authority. Thanks.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Cliff. I'm not going to say very much on this because I have seen this many times now in various incarnations at Harbour Committee, Harbour Stakeholder Group, and in my capacity as Harbour Duty Holder. So it's over to Toby first and then anyone else.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Cliff, for the paper. I will keep it brief in the interest of time, and I know that this has already been through the Harbour Committee, and after tomorrow, I guess this will probably be the last time we see such a paper at this committee, assuming everything kind of goes through. So I will be supporting the paper. There's a lot of brilliant things in it and a good direction of travel. I just wanted to sort of put on record my continued disappointment with the reliance on car parking revenue for the Harbour's financial sustainability. I note in the strategy that the Harbour's intending to increase revenue from car parking. And then I know that's not through adding additional spaces, it's about utilising spaces that already exist. But I really do think sooner rather than later we need to be looking at a strategy of reducing the amount of car parking in the harbour, to only those spaces necessary for people with accessibility needs and for the operational use of the harbour. But other than that, really good strategy, and I look forward to seeing a lot of the things in it implemented.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Wells. Yeah, I agree. There is a lot of reliance on revenue from car parking. It is an important part of revenue for the harbour at the moment. It's necessary. At the moment, as you're probably aware, the harbour is running a deficit of somewhere around about 0.75 of a million. And in time, I agree that other revenue streams need to be sought in order to eliminate the car parking which you mentioned. So in years to come, yes. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, very much allied to this work is the commercial perspectives work, where we have gone out to market on a number of sites for potential meanwhile use with a commercial perspective, which is a process that runs through another 10 days or so, and then Harbour Committee will be making decisions on that, and that's part of this work of building additional revenue streams or replacement revenue streams in a way, because in the long term, some of that land may be developed and may be used for other purposes. Some of it's in Gorham's pipeline, for example. So there are a number of of moving parts in this. Jenny, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I just think that it is, it's the same point. I really do think that this should have had more explicit kind of strategizing about how we're going to move away from car parking. I'm still, happy to support the paper overall, but and I do think that it's sort of early steps of getting to financial sustainability. But I do think something needs to be prioritised, and I guess it's not going to be anything to do with us anymore, but something does need to be prioritised in how we start moving those things forward, like things that are in Goreham's pipeline. How is the Harbour going to profit off of those long term? That's really an important question that I don't think this strategy answers well enough. So it's something that I guess we can throw it over the committee wall and hope that it lands in the Harbour committee. I guess the Harbour wall. I don't know. Yeah, don't mention the Harbour walls. That's number one. Sorry. I did have a little question about, just before we say goodbye to you in this committee, about the progress towards safety code compliance. It's mentioned in here, and I guess, is it looking confident? Is it looking good? I think that what's spoken about in the strategy looks, like it's being put front and centre. How are you kind of feeling about that progress, though?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Bartle. I mean, firstly, just to touch on your initial point, I think, the 5-year strategy, when I set about writing this, the aim was to for the Harbour to become self-sufficient in the period of time. And I think we can all appreciate 5 years, although it might sound a long time, isn't actually quite a long time. And the point you've picked up on, I agree with, and I think this is something which needs to be built on and developed as the Harbour Authority moves forward. With regards to safety, the Harbour Authority does comply with the Port Marine Safety Code. It is currently being audited as we speak by an independent auditor. And as far as its health and safety is concerned, i.e. its shore-based activities, it's doing well. So nothing to worry about as far as health and safety is concerned or compliance with guidance or legislation.
Thank you. Tom.
Thank you very much for this. I think our qualified support is there for it. Obviously, the devil's in the detail of how some of these things then get implemented, and particularly around financial sustainability and just making sure that mooring fees in particular remain fair. I'm just conscious of various representations we've had from members of the Bristol boating community, and just having that in mind as that work moves forward. It will be a challenging to kind of maintain that long-term sustainability or move towards it. So I think that challenge of car parking fee income and how that's offset against some of those sites that will be brought forward for development, how that's going to work. I'll be interested to see as the thinking develops around that. We do need to be mindful, though, that some people do need to use their cars. One, yes, for accessibility reasons, but also families as well that have got to get kids around the place, and so we do just need to make sure we keep things accessible for those that need to come into the centre, particularly where maybe they're not on bus routes and things like that, and we know that work is needed there. So if we just make sure we're being transport led before we start taking out all the city's car parking, and think about who may need to use that, and for the range of reasons that's been described. I appreciate that previously the Green Transport Chair is on the record as saying if you're thinking of driving into the city centre, then don't bother. But we do need to be mindful about how we move forward. So I think that's the summary of my feedback, and I think it will be helpful with the streamlined governance arrangements, hopefully, that we won't have things going to 2 committees going forward, and that we'll have the Harbour Committee sufficiently empowered to be able to just take these decisions going forward. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to draw things to a close there. Thank you very much, Cliff. I know this has been, this has been the mainstay of your work. To address Tom's point a little bit, this is going to be backed up by a business plan, which will be going to Harbour Committee, won't be coming to us, assuming everything goes well tomorrow. So that will be fleshing out that financial piece underneath. I think with regards to mooring fees and charges, it's a good challenge. We've got to make sure it's fair, and and that's again coming back to my earlier point to Toby. Part of the reason why we're looking to diversify the income streams across the harbour and have more commercial income, because it will allow us to, it reduces the proportion of the burden that's on the boaters. And I think, and I think in some ways I measure the progress we've made within the harbour in terms of number of statements to Harbour Committee over the past year and a half, and the number of questions and statements has fallen dramatically, and I think that's indicative of getting to a more stable position. The work that Cliff and the team have put in terms of building relationships and rebuilding relationships within the harbour and getting to a more sustainable position. So lots, good challenges, but and I think progress has been made. I guess the challenge is, keeping things going in the right direction, isn't it? So we are asked to approve the Bristol Harbour 2026-2031 5-year strategic plan. A seconder, please.
Seconded.
Thank you, Jenny. And those in favour? Lovely. This is just like old times. Right. So, thank you very much, Cliff. If you're needing to leave now, feel free. And I'll see you at Harbour Committee next week, if not before. Right. So moving on, we've got the Bristol Temple Quarter update. So this is to note, and Clem and Karen have been patiently waiting. So thank you for your patience whilst we've got through the initial items. Over to you.
Great, thank you. So this is the regular quarterly update for Bristol Temple Quarter. So I'll just give a brief overview on what's happened over the last 3 to 4 months. I think the first thing to note is the Bristol Temple Quarter now has a fully functioning board, in addition to the chair, Lingana, who was in post earlier this year. We now have secured 4 non-executive directors who will provide the expertise on inclusive growth, regeneration and development, as well as community skills. I think we're all incredibly impressed and pleased with the strength of the board in place, but also the level of interest, actually. I think it was a really tough decision for the board to make. Importantly, the non-exec directors will provide independent oversight and constructive challenge to the team and help shape the vision of Bristol Temple Quarter going forward. On inclusive growth, we have now launched the Community Fund. The first round was launched earlier this month. There are 2 tiers for that coming across. One which is grants up to £5,000, which will close on the 17th of November, and the second for up to £1,000, which will close on the 16th of January. This fund has specifically been set up to help residents in Bristol and the wider region access benefits from the regeneration, and is targeting charities, community organisations and community groups that deliver in line with the Temple Quarter Charter. The key focus on that is fair work, creating pathways to work, encouraging fair employment, community wellbeing and sustainable places. So we're really looking forward to those bids coming in and being able to take that forward. On employment and skills, we're continuing to use the hub to progress initiatives for youth persons, as well as on construction courses, and then continuing our outreach with cross schools across Bristol. In relation to St Philip's Marsh, we reported on this earlier this year that we went out to engagement throughout the summer. We have now received that feedback back, and we are looking at developing a master plan which will come forward for consultation early part of next year. And we're engaging across Bristol City Council as well as the West of England Combined Authority and communities and businesses in shaping that. Importantly, for the regeneration, we are now Southern Gateway, which is the multimodal transport hub. That is making good progress. We are due to the planning applications being reported to Planning Committee on Wednesday. And then also we have started the procurement to secure a contractor on board by the end of this year to take that forward next year. We are hoping that we will start on site mid next year. That is really important because it's a key enabling infrastructure in order to enable the housing and commercial ambitions to take forward across Bristol Temple Quarter. Eastern entrance, the new entrance into the University of Bristol campus, which was completed last year, had recognition last week. The Institute of Civil Engineers Southwest Awards. It was awarded both the Community Award and People Choice Award, which was really good news for the team and moving forward. We're also continuing our land assembly. We are engaged with owners particularly across Temple Meads West, and we are actively taking that forward in those discussions with a view to, once our private sector partner is on board early part of next year, to then progress the land assembly strategy, and there's more details on that in the report. But importantly, we have appointed Newstair as our strategic property advisors, and we also have Eversheds advising on the land assembly to make sure that we're able to secure the land for the regeneration. Other news is the private sector partner procurement is ongoing. We are pleased with progress, and again we are hopeful that we'll select a preferred bidder early next year to take that forward. And we're also engaging on meanwhile use and activation and developing the strategy at board, working closely with Bristol City Council's culture team on how we start to shape that. Happy to answer any questions.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Karen. I've seen Serena's hand first and then Toby's. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. Obviously, a lot of work's gone into that, and I was really encouraged to see under employment skills the adult construction level training courses. Obviously, there's a massive skills gap in the city, and that not only are people going on courses, but they're being offered interviews, which is great. My question is around something I've touched on before, which I think is really important for this committee to have oversight on, and that's the private sector partner, which you've just mentioned, the appointment process. I think we discussed this before, that we wanted to scrutinise or input into that procurement process, but it sounds like it's been quite progressed, it's quite far along. How would we go about that, please?
More than happy separately to brief you in terms of the procurement, the questions which are publicly available. It is must note though, it is a legal process. So, we will be following that through, and we do have Eversheds advising us on that. So we're able to give you information around it, but it would have to be within the confines of the legal process that's underway.
I must admit, I thought we would have more of an active involvement in some oversight on that, Chair. Just wondered what your thoughts were.
I guess the oversight is more through the council's involvement and through the involvement of the leader as within strategy and resources within the constitutional makeup of the LLP. John, do you want to add to that?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Thank you, Karen. Yes, it's a very important process, Councillor, and it's an important appointment. It is very much something that's being run by the Temple Quarter Partnership on behalf of the various partners that make that up. I think that's the first thing to say. We have representation through Tony's involvement in the programme, generally as the leader, but also I'm a representative on the board for the council and gives regular updates as well as part of that.
However, as Karen said, we'd be happy as part of our, we set out a programme of engagement with the committee, didn't we, following a report some time ago. So we'd be happy to give an update on the procurement process in a separate session. That will be fine.
I mean, just to add to that, I am happy to facilitate a offline briefing. I'm happy to facilitate it, to invite Karen and team to give an offline briefing on the process, on the criteria involved. I guess, where we can't get involved is in the weeds of who's in the running, etc., etc., etc. And I guess that's where there's sensitivities. But happy to arrange that. Okay. Toby, I had you next.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the paper. Very comprehensive update on so many different areas. Echo Serena's comments about the construction courses that have been running. Those of us who've been attending the viability working group know that construction skills is a huge issue in the city, and the fact that those courses are being run and that people are being offered interviews for jobs in the vicinity is great. Also good news on the collaboration with the Animal Rescue Centre on the, securing that site as part of the regeneration, but also securing, working together to secure a new site for them. That's a great example. So well done for that. I wanted to pick up a few points around land assembly. It's really good that things are coming together on that, because that seems to me like a really critical part of making all of this work. The examples that people often give of good developments around the city tend to be the ones where developers or groups of developers have control over larger areas rather than just lots of tiny individual plots, because it allows the public realm interventions, the transport interventions, etc., to all kind of come together more coherently. So it's great that you're working on that. So there's one specific question, and then maybe a point for the chair. So the specific question is about the City Point building, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, it's the building opposite the Temple Meads ramp, the horrible concrete thing. It says the strategy is being executed for vacant possession or something like that. Maybe you could just clarify a little bit what the sort of timeline is for that and what that means in plain English. Yep. And then my second point would be that this is another area where I think I'd appreciate a more in-depth briefing on what those land assembly strategies are. I appreciate there might be commercial sensitivities about those, so that could be a kind of a private briefing as well. And it's probably not as urgent as the one on the PSP, but at some point that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so on City Point, that building is owned by Bristol City Council and is optioned to the LLP to bring forward for development with our private sector partner. In terms of the land strategy at the moment, there are a number of leases within the building, which we are working very closely with Bristol City Council's property team in order to allow a managed transition from that in order to be able to secure the land. We're also looking as part of our meanwhile use process of how we can actually activate that space in the meantime in order to be able to keep maintenance costs as minimal as possible, as efficient as possible, and possibly early days to say, but we are looking at sort of how we can have a consolidated construction compound or something in place which then could link in with the construction skills. So working really closely across within Bristol City Council on how we can facilitate that, and also then engage with other contractors and developers as well over how we can have something that's efficient. In terms of the land assembly strategy, I'm more than happy to have an offline briefing on that to give more details. I would hope that in our update in late spring next year, we'll be able to be a lot more definitive of the land assembly strategy once our private sector partner is in place.
Yeah, thanks. Just on that, if we can maybe work out the sort of best timings for that, because there's no point in us organising a briefing and at a point where where we're still waiting on other things to fall into place to be able to elaborate on that strategy. But there also might be a point where we can have an offline briefing ahead of that paper potentially coming to committee. So we'll take that one forward. Jenny, I think I saw your hand, and did I see Tom's hand? No, I shouldn't tempt fate, should I? Oh, sorry, it was Cam's hand.
Sorry. Yeah, so I think the land assembly, that was something I picked up on as being quite key to our overall process and strategy. But I think, yes, sort of spring might be soon enough. So maybe it's fine to not have the briefing before that, unless you think that there's...
I'm happy to brief before then. I just wanted to give a timeline for when actually a paper would be able to come into the public domain.
Yeah. I think that might be fine, that kind of timeline. So, but we can discuss that more offline. I had a comment and then a question. So my comment was about, it was interesting seeing the St Philip's Marsh feedback, where so much focus has come back about centering everything on Feeder Road. And I just wanted to kind of feed in that maybe that's because that's the bit where everyone knows it more, and there's quite a high disincentive to recommending like the bit next to the waste depot, because when I go on a tour, I'm like, I don't want anything to be here. I want to leave immediately. Because it's very smelly. So I just want to make sure you're aware that we need to acknowledge that there's a potential bias in the feedback we got, and not allow that to kind of bias us or restrain us too much. And I guess I'm aware that the purpose of the first stage was very much to get like a gist, a direction rather than anything too specific, but I just wanted to bring that up as a point. And then the bit that I wanted you to elaborate on a touch more was about meanwhile uses, ground floor activities on finished constructions. You kind of said that you were engaging with operators, which felt very vague. So I'd quite like to hear a bit more about how different members of the community, both locally and maybe a bit more like broad Bristol, have been engaged. If groups like the Dings community groups have been involved with that. And yeah, just generally, what local networks are you using? Who are these people? Thanks.
Okay, I can start and then let Clem elaborate a bit further. So I think on the first point, on the local centres, there will be multiple local centres across St Philip's Marsh, given how big the area is, and so we're working that through sort of as part of phasing and what can come forward. And we're very alive to the fact of the sort of the waste area there, and also the being able to link back outside of St Philip's to make sure that we're attracting people in and out to be able to make the best use of space on that. In terms of the meanwhile use strategy, there is a long-term plan that we will work up when our private sector partner is on board in terms of the master plan around the station, to make sure that there are active and safe routes that are properly activated using ground floor uses. And we would start to see that come forward a lot more next year when the private sector partner is in place. In terms of what activity is going on now, in order to be able to utilise the sites that we have in place to start to make that change. I mean, Clem, you've been working with our team on that.
I think, I was trying to read the exact wording at the same time. I think, so we've been working with a consultancy called Start Advisory, who in turn have been working really closely with the council's public art team. I don't think that's officially their title, but those guys. That's to kind of develop a bit more the thinking in terms of what you could do in different locations. So and we can share a map that I think was in an earlier iteration, but it kind of confused it more. But essentially looking at of the sites that the LLP has an option on, so Temple Square, the City Point building, the plot directly opposite, so kind of next to Station Approach. What could you do in those areas in terms of things like activation, so public art, food and drink, whatever, as well as things like construction skills, construction compounds, all that kind of thing, and seeing where you might be able to kind of have a bit of a mezze of options. What they are imminently about to do, so there hasn't been a huge amount of kind of public or community engagement at the moment. They're about to start a bit of soft market testing in terms of not a kind of formal call to people to pitch ideas, but just to kind of see what would interest the market, what kind of conditions would need to be put on it, how long would they want the sites for, that kind of thing. I think at that point we'll run a kind of parallel piece of work with, again, fairly light touch, but with community groups like the Dinks Community Association. We've had a few early conversations with the guys at St Mary Redcliffe Church and Redcliffe Community, because obviously in terms of geography they're right there, just in terms of what kind of thing we could be doing, what the community would want to see as well. So it is quite early days, so when you said the wording was quite vague, that is kind of where we are at, although maybe it was a bit too vague. But we can certainly definitely bring an update back to the next one of these, but we do actually also have an all-member briefing, I think, on the 26th of November, so we can make sure that with it, because I think within the next couple of weeks we will actually have an update on that, so we can bring that then as well. I just wanted to, I know it wasn't a question, in the St Philip's Marsh feedback report on page 12 of the appendix, I was just checking, because I think other people raised the point about, is it kind of familiarity that people are going for? We did have people kind of from elsewhere saying actually for them it would be better, you know, near a Totterdown or something like that. I did check though, and actually the thing that really came out on top in the responses was actually the fact it's by the water, and it was that kind of canal front. Obviously you've got the river, but it's kind of mud for 12 hours a day or something. So, but yeah, we'd definitely take your point that people's feedback comes from that.
Thank you, Clem. I had Cam's hand and then Tom's, and then Tom is going to get the last word again, unless I think of something quick to say.
So yeah, regarding the St Philip's master plan, I welcome that progress is being made on that. I was just wondering whether there'd be further engagement with councillors before we get to the draft master plan being published and getting to public consultation about the direction of travel with the master plan.
Yes, we're trying to work out when, and I think Karen said in the new year, which could be any time. Yeah, we're just kind of mapping out how we do that. We're also planning a kind of stakeholder inverted commas session as well. I think probably there'll be two things just because of the number of people interested, but definitely, yeah.
Thank you. And Tom.
Thank you for this update. It's great to see all the work that's been happening. It's good that we get these updates, I think, at a good frequency, because actually what we're able to see from update to update on a quarterly basis is actually clear progress that's been made, whether that's the recruitment of the independent non-exec directors, this time the launch of the community fund, which is really brilliant to see. And I've managed to get out to the engagement hub as well, which is a really good space, and hopefully that we're getting lots of it used well. Hopefully, you know, we'll continue to get good updates that will share good progress. I think from my perspective, understanding kind of what that engagement journey with councils looks like is helpful. I think, obviously, I find it interesting that from the green benches, there's frustration being expressed, given you've got the leader of the council. So there's clearly something going wrong between the Green Party leader and the councillors, and that communication gap there that is obviously for themselves to resolve. I've been broadly happy with the engagement I've had in the process so far, so thank you. And also for when we are meeting, being so open in terms of answering questions. Viability is obviously a huge challenge that we know will continue to be going forward, and so just make sure that we do get that affordable housing strategy and what that phasing is going to look like alongside infrastructure being brought forward will be sort of something that's a really key component for me, as you often hear me raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'm just going to bring it to a close. Thank you, Karen and Clem, for sticking around and for providing that update. It is good. I know that there has been concerns in the past about levels of updates, and I think we've got to the right place now with engagement, notwithstanding that, you know, we've maybe agreed to a couple of offline things to pick up on some details, but you know, with the all members briefings, with these briefings regularly in this forum as well, I think it's good, especially as, you know, we're now seeing momentum starting to build. You know, the things starting to happen more widely. So I just want to thank you, and we shall see you again sometime soon. So we've been asked to note that report. Seconder, please. Oh, Tom's put up his hand. Thank you, Tom. And that's it. We don't need to vote on it because it's a noting. Right. We have 2 reports left. So the quarterly finance report. Alex, is this you presenting?
It is. Thank you, Chair. So this is another paper for noting. So this is the P5 revenue and capital report. So if you it has a cover report, but if I encourage you to look at the appendix, which is where the detail is. So from a revenue perspective, the services to which that report to this committee are effectively collectively reporting an underspend of about £1 million, forecast outturn to the end of the year. That's largely driven by continually positive income from development management fees, as well as some effectively underspends in some cultural reserves. On top of that, to a slightly lesser degree, there's a series of services that effectively exercising restraint through the year to help deal with the council's overall financial position. As it says here, the Harbour Authority is reporting a break-even position, and some comments have been made about how it's able to do that, and that will be for the future committee to report on that in future. There is one amber saving in year, which is related to markets, fees and charges, which has previously been reported, so that's not new. In capital, as my finance colleagues often say, it's never good to overspend. It's always good to underspend, but obviously underspend is more of the annual challenge we face with capital projects, to ensure that we get timely delivery over the course of the year and that we don't over forecast, because obviously that's not good financial planning. So there's a series of capital items there where you can see to varying degrees some are underspending, 1 or 2 quirks where they're over, and there's some explanation after that table, which I'm happy to draw out in any questions. And then again, there's a section D is capital in relation to the Harbour Authority, and both the Harbour Authority and in the general fund, we're looking at about 73% forecast spend on capital at P5. Very happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Tom, I'll take you first this time. If someone else can queue themselves up for the last word.
I thought I'd mix it up. Thank you for that update. I wanted to focus in on the capital spend, but just before I do, I just wanted to come back to something you said in your chair's an announcement earlier around St Nick's market fees. I wouldn't think where else to shoehorn it in. I just wanted to understand, when do you anticipate that report will come back to this committee? Or at the earliest, when do you think it will come back?
That's a very good question, Tom, to which I don't have an answer at the moment. I think we had hoped to maybe be back in February, but I don't know if that's...
Currently assuming February.
Yeah.
February at the earliest.
But we'll have to update the forward plan if that slips for whatever reason. But that's the intention.
Cool. Won't be this side of Christmas.
It won't be.
No.
Thank you. Right, to come back to this report, thank you. So, to your point about capital spend, yes, it's a challenge and a real concern. I mean, I was at Strategy and Resources recently to see that our underspend on the capital this year is now projected to be £108 million, which doesn't indicate particularly good financial planning on the part of this council. I don't remember it being that bad for some time. The thing I wanted to drill in specifically on this committee was the flood risk work and just what's going on there. So obviously read the updates in front of us, the GR16 for completeness. Could you just talk to us a bit more about what's happening there? Because obviously capital work slipping around flood risk management is obviously something that when I see that as a headline would be, that's quite concerning. So could you just elaborate where we are, what's being done to bring things back on track or keep things on track as well, and just can we understand what that future profile now looks like?
Sure. So I think the bulk of that underspend is around the way we've profiled expenditure on the full business case this year. So I would expect that to change in future periods. We've procured full business case consultant now, and so we'll be you'll start to see expenditure there. There's been some smaller movements there, and they're detailed in the wording there, where in particular there was there's been a grant that we've been unable to spend in the time that we hoped to, so that's now forecasting underspend. It may still come in, but I think the bulk of what's driving that GR16 is around our BAFS profile. Another funding line in the table is the ASEA flood defences, or ASEA or AC, depending on your inflection. Again, I mean that's a project that's actually spent about £130 million and is nearing completion, but South Gloucestershire Council is the accountable authority yet. So again, you'll see that a very hockey stick uptick in that towards the end of the financial year on that one as well. So it's not that we're not pursuing work, it's that particularly in relation to BAFS, it's the reprofiling of when we spend money, and then some smaller figures in that GR16 code.
I think following the meeting, it'd be helpful to see a bit more detail around that. So what I'm worried about is it slips this year, and then it slips again next year, and it slips again the year after. I just really want to understand the detail of like, will this catch up next year or not, and if there's any further knock-on impacts, and what, if anything, in terms of risk management or additional assurance we're putting in place to make sure there isn't further slippage, because I think that the flood risk management is obviously quite crucial to the whole of the Temple Quarter area and schemes that are coming forward, and some of those wider challenges. So it'd be really helpful to see a bit more detail just about how we're managing that.
So, Chair, if you agree, I'm very happy to provide a written update to members of the committee on that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think just getting that clarity. Jenny.
Yeah, I guess the approach to that question made me kind of think about how we approach these papers, because I suppose Tom has the benefit of sitting on strategy and resources, and I don't make the time to read the papers for that very frequently. So maybe he's got a bit of a different perspective, but I think maybe as a committee we want to start looking more at where are our big underspends that come through in these papers, and kind of tying that into officer reporting, because I find it quite difficult to, you know, we hear from the flood team annually, but it's quite difficult to know whether this risk is to do with their work or whatever. Not risk. I suppose the risk associated with an underspend. So it's maybe something that we could think about just behind the scenes, how we approach these, because obviously these are like little snippets, they're like little fragments that, as individual things, like, oh, this has got a big red number next to it, maybe it's bad, it's probably easier for us to keep on top of it in a different way, so that when we receive these reports, we can sort of understand the position without particularly having to ask loads of questions at the end of a long meeting in the way that we're doing now, which I feel, I don't know, I sort of feel like it's a weakness that I have, and I feel like probably other people feel it's quite difficult to do this part of the meeting. So I don't know, that's something that I'm just suggesting, but there's no particular action I'm saying.
I think it's a good point, though, because I guess I've sat on audit committee, for example, so I've had experience of seeing, being bombarded with figures month in, month out for previously, and they can be challenging. So maybe we do need to have some form of session whereby we can get to, drill down into some more detail than we can do in a public session, and get a greater understanding of what's, what is shown, what is not shown, and how those relate.
Well, or alternatively, it could be up to sort of you and I as chair, vice chair, and Alex to sort of look through these in advance of the meeting and go, is there anyone we need to bring in just for like a little extra session regularly, because it is the same numbers every quarter, and it's the same ones that we're kind of like, oh, should we have asked more questions about this? So yeah, I think it's more about how we program things to note, things for us to note, and tying them into performance and capital and revenue.
Yeah, noted. I guess the other thing I would slightly note is we're always looking at these in arrears. So we're looking at the end of August, and we're now 2 months further on, and the up-to-date figures could be showing a slightly different picture. But I guess we'll never get quite over that problem. Toby, and then I'm going to draw this to a close, because we've got one item to go.
Quickly on that same point, I think we're drawn into using the finance report as a progress report on topics when that's not really its purpose, but we don't have another mechanism, so I understand why people do ask questions at that point. In the WECA committees that I'm part of, they have a general report that comes to every committee that's like delivery assurance or something it's called, but it's like delivery updates, where there's just a few headlines for some of the key ongoing projects, and you get a couple of paragraphs about each. That could be a way to manage this, so we're kind of kept abreast of some of these topics that don't need to come to us for a decision or anything like that, but they're important.
Okay, thank you, Toby. Officers will have heard that and be taking it in, I'm sure. Okay, we are just asked to note the P5 thingy, so I think we've noted that there has been some good challenges, and I think we're going to get that additional information circulated afterwards. So leads us on to the last item, the Q2 corporate risk report. It's our only corporate risk still is the emergency planning response team. We've got Emma here with us. Are there any questions you want to ask Emma, bearing in mind that she is going to be with us in February for a deep dive on the issues as previously agreed at this committee? Thank you, Tom. Jenny, you're not happy to wait for the deep dive?
I'm not going to ask a question. I'm just going to say it's looking good from what I can see. And as ever, Emma, thank you very much for your hard work. It does really, even though this is a high risk, it does really feel like you have all of the things getting ready to be tied up, even if they're not yet tied up. So thank you.
I'd say thank you, Emma, too.
Breaking out in harmony all round. So on that note, we'll note the corporate risk report, draw the meeting to a close. Thank everyone for their attendance and their contributions, much appreciated. And thank you, Emma, Alex, John, Ian and Ash for sticking it out right to the bitter end. And anyone who's still watching on YouTube.